I've been thinking about this for ages. I've run an MSSP, and there's a bunch of other people who collaborated with me. We found, these three things. You can put up meters for these three things, and that's going to be the entire interesting story. If the board wants to delve into any of those data points, they can, and you've got obviously metrics to back them up. But those three things are the things that you need to care about.
And you're saying kind of regardless of what your product is in security, I
Yeah,
mean, do
yeah,
you can you share what those three things are?
yeah, I guess so. It's just like it was so hard getting them, but I will pass them on.
This is Designing Security Products, where we talk about the intersection of cybersecurity, research, and product design. Today, I'm talking with Stephen Johnson, who is the Principal User Experience Designer at FireMon. So, Stephen, thanks for joining me today, man. How's it going?
Going great. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So we had a chance to talk a little while ago just about cybersecurity and UX and kind of what's happening there. So let me start by just asking a question like, how did you get involved in UX, and then how did you make your way to cybersecurity?
So I guess my elevator pitch of why am I in UX is because I was that geeky kid that was helping out mum's friends with their computers, and they'd always be like, I'm so terrible at computers, and half of the time it was like, actually, you're not terrible at computers, it's just they hid that button on you, or they made that really unintuitive. And I kind of got sick of doing that support, but I always thought, wouldn't it be nice to fix that at the grand scale? Why don't we do this at a higher level so that we don't have so many people across the world having this point of confusion and, hurting their egos quite badly. So that's kind of UX didn't exist at that point. And obviously later on, when I was doing graphic design, I was aware of the trends. I was aware UX was growing, and immediately it was me all over it. It's like, there's more to design than just making it look pretty. And these thought leaders have such great stuff to say that, like, I got to start using this in my designs right now. So I turn my design ops jobs into user experience jobs. So that's the one side of it. For cybersecurity, I've always been, again, a geek specifically into cyberpunk and the idea of like hackers and, rainy weather and neon lights. That's all completely my thing. So when I saw a job opportunity at a, nearby giant like retail park with like this giant boring office that is one of the world's biggest makers of cybersecurity stuff. I was like, whoa, I've got to try that. This sounds like an absolute dream job. Although it'd be an absolute nightmare for a lot of us, I'm sure. But I was their first UX designer, and it was a giant company, and yeah, I had a blast. I was really happy that it all came together.
Yeah, very cool. Absolutely resonate with kind of understanding UX concepts before knowing that there were terms for those and there was a whole industry around that. I can remember when I first found out about UX as a thing, as a practice, I was like, there's like a name for like there's like real names for some of the stuff that I just kind of felt right and felt like it should be a thing or should be a good practice, you know. So yeah, that's really cool, man. I love hearing the origin story, right? Whether it's in a Marvel movie or someone getting into UX and cybersecurity. So tell me a little bit about what you do kind of on the day to day at Farm.
Sure, I'm one of two, it's not a very big company, but I'm one of two UX designers here. We're kind of split between different products, but I try and get us talking regularly anyway. I'm working on kind of product innovation side, doing some stuff with AI and doing some work on a piece that's really targeted towards the very top levels of cybersecurity, management and companies chain, the CISOs and the higher up managers that are responsible for that kind of thing. So for me, that's kind of a new persona to target. It's been really interesting. And the solution is a SaaS one. So a lot of the products I've worked with in the past have not been. It's been really hard to do stuff like, testing and metrics and whatever else. And it's been great getting my grubby little fingers on more of those data points and getting more direct insights. So I'm also doing a lot of research of watching videos of people onboarding into this product. And I'm constantly taking those and cycling back to the team and pointing out, hey, this seems like it's becoming a theme over here. And um, also the good side of it of like hey, somebody just got our thing installed and up and running in 3 minutes, and they went through this thing and selected all of the stuff they wanted. Like it was the most intuitive thing, like drinking water. And seeing how that reflects back on the team and how they're like one hand energized, but they're also, you know, trying to problem solve, trying to solution, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But it's great to see that the life that it brings.
Yeah, very cool. So what one question I have is kind of what tool are you using to record those and then kind of watch those recordings after the fact?
Right, yep. So this is, the tool's not designed and made for it at all, but it's just what we happen to be using. It's called Gong, Gong. I think it's mainly a sales tool. In fact, I'm not even sure if I'm seeing all of the correct calls because probably don't use it for everything. But yeah, that's kind of the point of it.
Great. And then so you're looking through the information, kind of searching for these hidden nuggets in watching users go through it. When you're surfacing those trends, how are you sharing that with the rest of the product team or even the company as a whole?
Yeah, I have a lot of autonomy, so I get to like insert it as like, this is the next thing to do without very much consultation if I need to. But I am always trying to spread awareness. So I've got spreadsheets going, I'm tracking reoccurring themes. Yeah, there's trying to tag them all with, a customer frustration, a customer need, a customer positive point that they're expressing or whatever. And so, yeah, I've got a big list of that for, you know, trying to quantify all of this qualitative data, but I'm also making sure that I take clips, I take the golden moments, and I put them, into view of all of the stakeholders so they can see how things are going.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I think that I found that it's always helpful for the team to see the real experiences, right? Of the moments of frustration, as you mentioned, and then also the moments of joy where, or you're like, man, they just got it, right? Nobody had to explain anything. They were just able to accomplish their goal super quick. So yeah, that's always fun.
Absolutely.
Challenging. There's
A picture's worth a thousand words, a video's worth a thousand pictures, but a long video is not worth anyone's time. So they're really grateful when you can give them a snippet.
That's a great quote. So I know that you're doing that on the user testing side. Like you've got, I guess, an application Gong that is recording these sessions, and so you can find the gems that are in there. Are there other ways that you're doing more active user testing where you're interacting directly with customers and watching them walk through the product and kind of interacting with them?
Yeah, a little bit. Quantity wise, that's much lower. I've gone through literally hundreds of the pre-recorded calls.
Mm.
But in terms of like live user calls, I could still count them on my fingers at this point, and I'm not happy with that. But I think that probably reflects on a greater trend, especially in the cybersecurity industry, of it is so hard to talk directly to customers. So what is even the right way to do that, or the right way to get that working? So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's totally been a challenge for us as well. Like finding the people, connecting with them, and then getting them to agree to give you 20 minutes to kind of walk through the product and everything. It's we know that it's super valuable, and so we want to have it happen, but it can be a challenge finding those people and sourcing them. So we've been doing some experimentation, trying to get better at that.
yeah. No, from my own side, like I at the very first company that I mentioned, this giant company, it was so hard to speak to them. And at the end of the day, you start speaking to them, you realize this isn't actually a user, this is a customer.
Mm.
And so your chances of reaching the actual user are just like that much less because they're so far detached from any business that the company has. So my approach became I've got to build my own network. Like I need to make this happen myself. I'm going to start going to cybersecurity conferences. I'm going to join cybersecurity chat rooms wherever they are. I'm going to go in deep and, do some serious undercover research that is going to persist with me for every job that I do. So in this product that I was just talking about, I've actually done a bunch of interviews because I happen to know CISOs, just people who grew up with me in the cybersecurity industry and eventually got bigger and bigger jobs. And I'm just looking on my LinkedIn, I'm like, wait, I actually know a bunch of CISOs at this point. This is great.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. Because I feel like most security products, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but most security products, regardless of who maybe the practitioner is that's using the product the majority of the time, one of the personas is always the CISO because that's who is going to be deciding whether they purchase your product or not, right? Is that something that you've
Yeah.
seen?
No, absolutely. I've been in part of efforts in most of these companies of like, where's the part of this app that we can show the CISO that makes them happy with their purchase, that makes them happy that the right things are getting done?
Yes, absolutely. Are there tricks that you've found, like things that CISOs almost always want to see, or things that ways that you can show the product's value? Are there trends that you found there?
That's a super interesting topic of research. I had the experience recently of showing CISO all these data points, and they're like, oh, yeah, those are interesting data points, but I would be removing most of those in my discussion with the board, right? Because there's the CISO on one hand who may or may not be technical, who may or may not care about these metrics, and then there's what do they tell the people who control the purse strings of the company. And I got some really great insight into this at a conference just a couple of weeks ago, just asking some random guy. I didn't know what his job was or whatever else. And he's like, you know what? I've been thinking about this for ages. I've run an MSSP and there's a bunch of other people who collaborated with me. We found, these three things. You can put up meters for these three things, and that's going to be the entire interesting story. If the board wants to delve into any of those data points, they can, and you've got obviously metrics to back them up. But those three things are the things that you need to care about.
And you're saying kind of regardless of what your product is, insecurity,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
can you share what those three things are?
yeah. I guess so. It's just like it was so hard getting them, but I will pass them on. So one of those metrics is culture. Like if your company's product supports culture in some way, then the metric that goes into it will be like whether the culture score is going up or down. So more people using training in cybersecurity, are more people finishing courses, are more people using password managers, are more people, I don't know, just engaged in whatever way with your particular product in cybersecurity. So with one of mine, it's like how many different people with requests who are just average users, they don't necessarily know anything about cybersecurity, but how many of them are going into the product and looking at where their request is at, right? That gives them a level of awareness and it shows engagement with your product and it contributes to this culture score because if people are aware, it ups the culture score. If they're not, then it goes down. So the other two are, what is it? One which is like known bad things going on in my environment, like number of computers with no endpoint protection software right now, number of firewalls with rules that allow way too much stuff in, number of vulnerabilities in our web servers. So that's That's another metric. That's just one metric though, right? That one goes up and down. Paired with something called agility, where how fast is my company able to deal with this thing? So the more people that are using your system, the higher the agility, and the less you have to worry about your outstanding issues. So if you've got high agility and high outstanding issues, you don't need to worry that much because these are eventually going to get dealt with. If you've got low agility, then yeah, you're in a bad place most of the time. But yeah, if you boil whatever it is that you've got down into those things, then that makes a really simple and compelling story for a board that can go all the way up the chain.
That is super interesting, super interesting. And I'll confess, you always, as a UX practitioner, are trying to balance users' needs with the objectives of the business, right? Because if the business is not successful, then there's no product for the users to be able to use, right? So you got to balance those two things. But I had not thought about the board itself and kind of their view of all of this. And so that's a fantastic insight there on just kind of considering the board as a persona, like the boss of the CISO, right? Yeah, very cool, very cool. So, who are some people maybe that inspire you, either in the UX world or in the cybersecurity world, or maybe both?
Yeah, Luke Robleski. I hope I'm not butchering his last name there. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's great with quantitative data and has used his position at various companies to dig up just amazing numbers on research and really firm arguments that nobody can really knock down if they have a counter argument. It's like, well, you think that's nice, but Luke shows this. We're going to go with Luke on this one. I love that. Jared Spool. Um, I love how he just gets things riled up, right? Like forces you to think and be and use your critical thinking. And even if you're thinking, he's full of it, that's still worth thinking about.
Yeah, yeah. Jared is the goat for sure. Just been doing it in the game so long, and the whole. I guess he can't say Amazon, but everyone kind of knows it was the Amazon button that he changed the wording on the button, and then huge change in the number of checkouts with Amazon made them at this point billions of dollars.
I did not know that was one of his claims to fame.
Yeah, I'll find the article. It's something like it's got a name like the $7 million button or something like that. And so this was early. He mentions a large retailer. Maybe he even says like from the Pacific Northwest or something. I mean, it's like he can't say Amazon, but it's pretty easy to figure out that it's Amazon. But apparently Bezos left a voicemail for him that says, "Jared, you the man," or something like that. Left him a voicemail because he changed it. Was the So I'll find the article and I'll send it to you, and I'll also drop it in the show notes for this as well. But you used to have to with Amazon, I think it is, you used to have to sign in order to be able to and create an account before you could kind of check out with a card. And they did away with that. They said, or you can just check out as a guest. I think that's what it was. I'm trying to remember now. But it was some little process like that they just changed the wording of this other option that made it super obvious to users. I don't want to create an account. I just want to buy this thing right now. And this is, again, early days of Amazon. And then their conversion rate on checkout just went through the roof because people would be like, I don't want to create an account.
Nice.
I'll find the
Yeah,
article and send it to you. It's a great read.
very cool. And I guess another one that I have to mention is Indy Young, who's been a huge advocate of actually like meeting your users and being next to your users and hanging out with your users. Like, I think, I was on a call recently where somebody was really frustrated and they're like, you don't know what it's like. You're not here behind my desk working day to day with this thing. It's like, you know what? You're absolutely right. I don't, and I would love to. Let's do some job shadowing so I can feel the pain that you're feeling and so I can come up with solutions for the pain that you're feeling. That would be great. And I feel like we lose some of that when we're just looking at numbers and we're looking at all of these like SaaS analytic solutions. That human element is so important and we can't lose track.
Completely agree. Statistics are great. And analytics and everything. Those are definitely a piece of data for you to look at. I remember somebody saying, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but the numbers will tell you what people are doing, but it will never tell you why they're doing that. You have to do other types of research where you're doing user testing, doing customer interviews, doing where you go and sit beside them, the job shadowing. That is what will give you the insights of why the numbers are doing what they're doing. Yeah, fantastic. So you mentioned that you've worked at a couple of different security companies, one that was larger, and now you're working at one that is more nimble, let's say. So what would you say to an early stage founder who thinks that they don't need to do research? They're kind of like, I know who my customers are. I'm creating a product that solves a problem I had. I know what users want. What would you say to that founder?
That's so interesting. I've been thinking about that. On one hand, awesome. That's great that you know what users want. This is fantastic. Tell me all about it and tell me why you think that. Oh, you had that job before, and this whole product is a solution for the job that you had before. Great, that's had value. How long ago was that? Was it recent? Was it not recent? What kind of size company is it? Is that the same company as your target market? I don't know. If it isn't, maybe we need to do a little bit more work here. But really, I feel especially with an early stage company, they're getting pushed and pulled in different directions, and their vision is being diluted left, right, and center, potentially, right, by people like, oh, I think we need to go this way, I think we need to go that way. So they're going to try and hold on to that core idea really tightly. And it's almost heartbreaking to say, no, stop, wait a moment. That might not be the case. Let's go do some research. But you can convert it, right? You can say it's important to have a vision and a mission, but how about we just refine things to make sure that you have maximum impact? You want this thing to sell, you want this thing to be useful. Let's not design for ourselves, let's design for everyone else. Let's do this. So yeah, I've been in some startups as well, done some side work, and it's very much like what you're talking about. Of like this is cool. There is vision, but we also need to do the research.
We're always operating off of hunches and guesses, right? So the more research we can do, the better we can, the more confident we can be in those assumptions, right? They can be validated assumptions. So yeah. So you mentioned that you've worked in a couple of different companies, and do you have any stories that you could tell, if maybe where something went really well, or maybe where you had an assumption that everyone was convinced that this was the thing we should do, and then research pointed you in a different direction when you actually when it got into it?
Yeah, sure. So just to clarify, I've worked in exclusively cybersecurity companies for the last 15 years now, and I don't want to do anything else. Like, I don't even apply to jobs if they don't have some kind of cybersecurity interest. I came up with the concept myself. I was like, you know what a really great product would be is this. And I went to my manager at the time and I pitched it to him. He's like, oh yeah, that sounds lovely. And then I never heard about it again. It never happened. And yet, a company on from that, different company, smaller company that targets a slightly different market, was like, hey, Stephen, we need you on board this product. We're doing this new thing. We're doing this zero trust thing, and we need you to make it happen. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I get to fulfill my dream. My dream is to get rid of firewalls and firewall rules and just focus on who's getting what, right? Paring it down, making rules readable, and starting again. And that's nice in theory, but then you're actually given the problem and you realize how hard it is. And it kind of comes down to a many-to-many problem. Like, you don't want to create spaghetti in your CSS. You don't want to create spaghetti in your rules for things. And how do you avoid spaghetti? Um, a couple different ways. You can like have very few rules and then have exceptions to them when you need them. That's not great. Or you have lots of very granular but very specific rules. And how do you juggle all of this? So yeah, the project was interesting. We were struggling with remote teams that didn't like it when we changed our minds about things. So we felt like real pressure to be like stay in line with our vision the whole time. But we had one transformative customer interview where they're like, actually, my company protects assets, and those assets can be seen at three different risk levels. There's like the crown jewels, the highest risk, and then there's ones underneath like that, which would be a bit of a, it'd be a PR snafu. It would kind of suck for a lot of people, but it's not game changing necessarily. And then there's a level underneath that of like, well, that's a too bad, so sad for us. Kind of expect that to happen, and we're going to do our best anyway. But yeah, so hearing it laid out that way, we changed the direction of the UI. Instead of being like an any to any, sorry, many to many, any to any potential spaghetti mess of like build with us and build yourself into a pit of doom, it became here's a template to start you off with that we think is going to, we did some more research, obviously, that it's going to work for 90% of companies and use cases. They can tweak it as they need to. They don't need to call the top one crown jewels. They can call it something else. But, we're going to give you 4 buckets to start with, and you can throw things in them. And that really changed the shape of the user experience significantly. And I don't know whether Forrester is pay to play, but we ended up getting an award for it that talks all about that as well. So that felt like a huge moment and a huge win for us. And another fun thing about that project was, this remote team we're having trouble with. I got real efficient at SharePoint and had a whole versioning system built into it where you could export a balsamic mockup into it, and it would file it appropriately and version it appropriately, so you could rewind to previous versions if you need to, but you could also version tag all of your exported wireframes. It was kind of a pain to set up. I mean, I enjoyed every minute of it because that's just me. But kind of a UX ops side of things, and products have since come out that save the need for all of that hassle, or at least most of it, most of the time. But it really helped with this remote team until we found out that they were taking screenshots of sections of the mockup, sorry, of the wireframe, and removing the giant detailed notes section that was on the side, which was like crucial and fundamental to understanding how this stuff actually got wired together. So that was funny too. It's hard work. And it was during
What?
COVID.
So why did they remove all of the instructions? That seems like that's such a critical.
I can only guess because I'm not there. It was during COVID time, so I wasn't able to fly to these people and actually establish rapport and you know get things working as smoothly as they should. But my guess was that the project manager wanted to keep it simple and thought,
Mm.
you know, we want them to focus on exactly this one thing at hand, and this thing that they're looking at is about appearances rather than about functionality. That's my only guess.
Yeah, yeah. That's too bad because I feel like if engineers understand the why of what they're building, then not only does that help them better understand this thing that I'm creating is valuable instead of just X number of lines of codes, right? Here's the problem this is actually solving for people, so my job has purpose. But it also gives them enough insight that they could come back to you and say, "Hey, what you have designed here is fantastic. That's going to take us 2 people weeks to get that accomplished. But we've got this other module over here that we've used that would do 90% of this, and that would take us like 5 people days. Could we, would something like this work?" And then it's always a trade off, like you can give the best experience possible, but if you can give 95% of the best experience possible and be able to do that in half the time, and then you can deliver more value to the end customers. So having those lines of communication with the engineering team, I feel like that probably only works if they understand the why in addition to just make it look like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this is why I love working close to the teams that I work with, and I mostly do because of exactly like that. Saves so much time, and everyone can be happier, especially when you show them the impact of what they've done. There was a small, fairly small ask, I thought, in this product for the installation experience. I did some uh, road mapping of like, what is it? There's so many different mappings, user experience map or product experience map, which kind of
Okay.
detailed from the very beginning how are they going to get this set up, how are they going to get it rolled out, because it's widely acknowledged that while the solution was lovely, it's a lot of work to get there. You had to move a lot of things over, you had to like lift and shift things, and one of the things was that the company is supposed to install a VM, a virtual machine that would be running this, that would have, various network access. And I had a very small thing of like, look, the person who's in security is not the same person who has control over these VM systems. And we're sending them a, 800 megabyte file that they're supposed to install as a VM. How are they going to get that around the network easily? How can we remove the pain points here? I know, we can have them visit this URL and punch in this code that will link it to the product and it will install the right thing. And how crazy is that to engineer? Is that hard or is that easy? Nobody answered, and that element got completely overlooked. And it was a crappy onboarding experience. It might still be now, I don't know. But it's just like, if only I could communicate these little touches a bit better, how much pain could be saved? But that's what we do. We keep trying.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a great example of, it's not just the experience they have in using your product, but it's all of the steps leading up to them actually using your product too, right? So that's a really important point. I want to go back to something before you mentioned that you had this light bulb moment talking with a customer where you realize that there are tiers of levels of security, right? And that was kind of a big aha moment for you guys. So when you get this feedback that seems like it's a new direction, this huge insight, how many other customers should you talk to kind of validate this? Or do you just kind of listen to one customer do that and you're like, okay, cool. We've had this insight. We're going to change everything, or we're going to change this aspect of our product.
Yeah, absolutely. You shouldn't just go for it, obviously, because anyone can say something new that impresses you every day. Just because you saw a TED talk on something doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily change your life, right? Or be agreed upon by the next TED talk. So, yeah, you got to validate. And again, it's hard finding people to validate with correctly. If you have networks to reach out to, like I do, then you can kind of do that stuff pretty quickly in a less painful way. So, I don't know if you know the old chat technology IRC, but there's still a lot of people who have been in the industry for a long enough time that they were around when that was cool, who still think it's cool, who have forums that you can drop into and be like, what do people think about this? Does this sit with your experience? And do quick validation that way. So there can be ways, and there can be easy ways, but they're harder to seek out, that's for sure.
That's fascinating. I had not thought about the old IRC channels that people are still there using that. Man, that's back in the days of like using AOL chat and Yahoo and MSN Messenger and that whole battle of who was gonna dominate that space. And wow, is there maybe a story where something went wrong and how you kind of ended up adapting?
I mean, we always adapt and we can get in situations where there's a lot of no's. I generally get on really well with PMs, and one of them I had like a real fight with over something. I can't remember the specifics now, unfortunately, but I remember I was pushing back on him and he was surprised that I was pushing back so much because, he's a PM. I'm just a designer, one of many. And I can't remember what the quote was, but something like have passion for your ideas and the things that you've come up with, but let them go as you need to or as you have to. And I've definitely done that a fair amount. But with this guy, come review time, I actually got like a glowing review of like this guy pushed back on me. This guy cares about his job and his work so much that he like came back at me harder than I could have ever thought. So that inspired me to keep going on that front at least. But in terms of things going wrong, like we always settle for second best, right? We always find another way. We always find something underneath. So it's hard for me to put my finger on something going completely wrong. User tests going wrong all the time. You sit down with all these expectations or researching who exactly the right kind of user to talk to. I once upon a time worked on an app that helped you find liquor stores in Canada. And the requirements were simple: must own an iPhone, must consume alcohol on occasion, right? That was all it took. And yet, despite those clear instructions, the people that we recruited, there's a guy who's like, well, I have this iPhone clone that runs Symbian OS, and I had a drink one time, like 3 years ago. It's like, oh, okay. Well, this is gonna make the rest of this half an hour really awkward, but I guess we paid you to be here already and we have to do this, so let's try and see if we can squeeze any value from this. And no, nothing. Zero zilch.
Might have been better off just thank you for your time. Goodbye.
Absolutely. I'm not quite sure why we didn't, but yeah.
Yeah, and it could be that the person just kind of really wanted to get whatever the compensation was, even though they weren't the target audience. So, yeah, it would have been better off if they had just lied and said that they did have an iPhone and that they do drink once a week.
Probably not. Probably
Yeah,
not,
I mean,
right?
that would
And
have
you'd be
given
getting false
false
info.
information. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd have been worse. Thanks for eventually being clear.
Yep. I talk about things going wrong 3 weeks into a job, and the senior product manager walks over to me and says exactly what you said about the startup guy, only this is a big company. He says, you know what? You don't need to actually talk to the users because we know exactly what they want. And nobody wants to hear that as a UX designer, like 3 weeks into their jobs. Like, well, why did you hire me? Why am I here? What is going on? You've got it all figured out, and you've just told me it doesn't matter. That felt like a very things have gone wrong moment indeed.
I loved how before when I asked the question, how would you approach that? And you started by, instead of being kind of contrary, you started by being very complimentary, like, oh, that's awesome. Tell me more about how you know this, right? Tell me about your experience that you have and kind of get them in, and then just ask some questions about, well, how do you know that? And have you talked to other people that have this problem? What did they say? Can we talk to them? Maybe there's probably more insights that will take your idea and just solidify it even more and kind of remind you of these things that you already know. So I love that too. That was fantastic advice there.
Yeah, I think I got to that eventually after this.
Right, exactly. That's how you always learn from experience of doing it the wrong way, right? Awesome. Well, Stephen, man, this has been a fantastic chat. You have dropped several little knowledge bombs here that I know are gonna help me, and hopefully the people that are watching or listening to this podcast will also learn from that as well. Any last thoughts that you have, maybe for someone who is just getting started in UX and cybersecurity? Any advice that you would have for them?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not going to be one last thing. That's a wide open question. Be keen. I mean, we're listening to a domain specific podcast right now. If you're in the domain, just be in the domain. Bask in it in every single way you can. So I didn't have a lot of knowledge coming in, and one of the ways I got it is by attending company-led training. And, going to company-led training and seeing a bunch of people who paid to be there watching this presentation over the course of 2 days and seeing the person speaking, not only are you learning more deeply what the product is for, what it's about, and why people care, but you're also seeing how the presenter is spending half an hour explaining a setting screen that should have taken seconds, right? If it was just made a little bit better. So you're getting cutting edge insight, you're learning, and I think a lot of people are scared to be too into the domain. Like they feel resentful. Like I don't need to know about all of these things. UX is UX, right? I could do UX over here, I could do UX over there any day. Principles are all the same. Sure, heuristic principles are all the same, but there are so many different things and so many different focuses of this industry that the more you can get into data analytics, company training courses, finding any area of the company, honestly, that will listen to you, go sit with the support department and hear the calls that they go through. Look at the ticket lists, mine them for data if you can. You can get like hard numbers real quick that way. Listen to cybersecurity news and podcasts to feel like you're part of the scene. If you know all about the crazy Google Aurora attack that happened, that was the origin of zero trust and the reason why we're building segmented products, then you feel more engaged. You understand what the stakes are, and you're going to have more passion for it, which is going to turn into better work. So really, I guess be there is my biggest takeaway. Feel it.
Awesome. Yeah, man. Thank you so much for your time today, Stephen. This has been fantastic. So I appreciate you taking time and talking with me and sharing some insights for the folks that are listening to this. So
So glad to be here and so glad to see the community that's coming together through your doing this. This is great.